This week on the Eldritch Lorecast.
The tattooed monk has tattoos?
No way!
Good reaction so far.
You are wise.
Thoughts on homebrew?
I will homebrew first.
And this is the death sword. It does plus 16 damage.
Is Eberron out yet? Is it not?
Oh, yeah! The Mega Goblin.
I suppose Darrington Press weren't publishing many 5e.
I know at least one that I worked on. Ben Byrne.
Get him, James.
Millennials are the youngest, 29 now, and it's giving me an existential crisis.
All that and more right now.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the #1 tabletop RPG podcast in all the realms. And this is a very special episode. Why, you ask? Because you're here, because you are listening. You have decided to put us in your ear holes and listen to the Lorecast. It was cute, and then I made it weird. I'm Ben Byrne, by the way, doing that. And I'm joined, as always, by Shawn Merwin, Dael Kingsmill. James Hake is here this week. James, I have a question for you. If you had to rank the following reasons for playing tabletop RPGs, what order would you rank them in? A, the socialization aspect, getting together with friends. B, the enjoyment, the fun, the joy that you get out of playing them. And C, the escapism, the storytelling, the engagement in story and themes. Where do your priorities land?
This is a really hard list to rank. But for me, I think I'll call escapism storytelling, right?
Sure.
We're losing ourselves in a story. I would put escapism top, socialization second, and fun a very close third. I will often sacrifice fun for better storytelling, but I can't do it too much or my players will bust out the torches and pitchforks.
Yes, I feel, you know what? I don't need to answer because your answer is my answer, I suspect. So, Shawn Merwin, for the contrasting opinion, what about yourself?
It's funny because this answer changes the older I've gotten. When I started playing, it was CBA. And then as when I went back to start playing 3rd edition as an adult, it was B, A, C. And
Gotcha.
Now that I am in the industry and playing a lot and working a lot, it's A, and then B and C are somewhere after D, which is work.
That's fair. That is also a good answer.
I'm surprised by these answers because for me, it seemed so quick. I was like, fun, and then way down here is like escapism, socialization. I hang out with friends doing other things. There are easier ways for me to escape the world. Like, I don't know, sticking on a movie is just a much easier mode of escapism for me. So to me, it seemed like really obvious that fun is #1. So this has been fascinating to hear.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I get, and obviously these three things, fun, socialization, and storytelling, I think is a better term, James. They blend and mix together. If I was to throw in a fourth one there, what about and this might sound odd, satisfaction? And I think of this more so when I'm thinking of miniature painting and wargaming specifically. There's a lot of satisfaction that comes along with playing a game with painted miniatures. Maybe that's not so much a tabletop role-playing game thing, but does satisfaction calculate in at all for any of you?
I think that satisfaction can also be from overcoming a hard challenge, right? If you play in the style of dungeon crawl game where survival is a big deal, then you can totally get satisfaction out of something that wasn't necessarily very fun also, right? Plenty of dungeons, grueling, brutal, hard to survive, but boy, did you triumph over the odds by surviving. Yeah. I feel like satisfaction ranks fairly low for me in all of those, which sounds bad, but I don't think is bad.
There's two different kinds of satisfaction though, depending on your role within the game, right? If you're a player, there's a satisfaction of a story well told, sharing the story with friends. On the DM side, there's the satisfaction of, did everyone get what they want? At the end of this game, did people say, that was awesome and I can't wait for next week? That's the satisfaction, at least for me, of GMing that side of the screen.
That's a great point. I often feel great satisfaction when I complete a game and I can see that all of my players are happy.
And you get to nod and go, my work here is done. Until next week.
Yeah, finishing a game and feeling excited for the next session is a good feeling.
By the way, Ben,
Yes.
over the weekend, it was my brother's birthday, and he got a bunch of new minis, and he spent, the week painting them, and he was showing us the other day, and Mum pulled up your Instagram to show him your painting, and my brother spent the whole time being like, cool, great, happy for you.
What's he playing? What's he getting into?
He's playing. Oh god, now I have to remember them, Ben. I think these were Warhammer 40k minis.
Okay, yeah, great.
But he's mostly been playing Infinity.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah. Infinity's great. I don't play it much anymore, but I've got 2 whole Infinity armies. They're great. It's a great game. Very complicated. Yeah. Headache inducing, you might say, but it's a lot of fun.
He enjoys it. But no, he'd done a great job painting, but then Mum showed him yours. And the ones where it looks finished, but you're like, yeah, about halfway there. He was that meme. He was that meme of that kid. Happy for you. Cool.
Well,
great.
I would say that like painting miniature, I'm very grateful. Like, thank you, Dael's mum. That's very flattering, because I think painting miniatures is like being a game master in the way that I think even Colville has described before, where you're always looking at the other person, whether it's on social media or the other stories being told. And I feel the same about other people when they post photos of their miniatures going, this is almost done. I just need to put the finishing touches. And I'm like, what more? What more could this need? This looks amazing. What are you doing? Person on the internet. So, but yeah, maybe your brother and I should play Infinity sometime. That'd be fun. Anyway, speaking of fun things and a sense of satisfaction, you might be satisfied if you read through the entirety of the new Unearthed Arcana, which has just dropped from Wizards of the Coast. It is an arcane subclass update featuring the Arcane Archer, the Tattooed Monk, and no less than 4 wizard subclasses: the Conjurer, Enchanter, Necromancer, the most evil of wizard subclasses, and Transmuter, missing this time the Arcane Domain Cleric, the Hexblade Warlock, and the Ancestral Sorcerer from the last time they did this Arcane subclasses. Anybody read through this? Anybody have opinions, thoughts, ideas, things we can put in a thumbnail? I don't know.
Say something incendiary.
Yes.
Ben,
nothing.
Ben, I don't know what to tell you. I have been through so much playtesting on this podcast already. Sometimes I feel like there ain't no playtesting left in the tank for me.
Yeah. All right. Let me quickly say, to have a thumbnail.
And we'll react to you, and it will be totally legitimate, as if we had read it ourselves.
Exactly.
Sure. Okay, great. Yeah.
That's how news works.
I want it known as well. I told Dante this exact eventuation would be the state of today's episode.
What it is? It's just that we love listener questions so much that we want to get through. Yeah.
Oh, Dael, your spin will be the salvation of us all.
Where would people email Dael if they were going to email us?
Email podcast at ghostfiregaming.com, Ben.
Okay, excellent. All right, well, maybe we'll get to those. Let me quickly fire through. I did have some brief thoughts for folks that are curious. I think the Arcane Archer is better. It feels very Hawkeye rather than like Arcane Robin Hood necessarily, because they've added, I think at 7th level, some additional non-combat specific trick arrows, like one that grows vines so that you can climb up things, and one that I think creates darkness or deafens things. I've got it in front of me, but I'm trying to find it. But I'm still kind of unsatisfied by the fact that it is like limited use for a lot of these things. With the Primordial Archer that we have in the Grim Hollow Player's Guide, now currently available on D&D Beyond, there was an intention to make it so that you could kind of always fire a magic shot, which I think gives you more of that feeling of being like a magic archer, as opposed to a fighter with a bag of tricks that you're kind of pulling out. It's still not 100% there for me, but maybe that's the difference between playing a fighter magic person and a ranger magic person, is the ranger just is going to innately feel more magical and primal. Good reaction so far.
You are wise.
Okay, great. The Tattooed Monk gets a bunch of tattoos. They look fine to me. I don't know. I didn't go in and like compare the strength relative to each other or anything like that. Apparently people are having big reactions to it.
I'm having a big reaction to it. What?
The Tattooed Monk has tattoos? What is this, man?
No way.
I think that was a pretty good thumbnail face, actually. I hope Dante uses that.
Now you have to choose. Which of us will you choose,
We can
Dante?
use all of them at different times. That's the, this is being recorded. I don't know if you know. If you're in the Twitch chat, just talk about the Unearthed Arcana among yourselves.
Are we podcasting
basically.
right now? I thought I was just chatting with my friends
We're doing
online.
a really bad job, except for Ben.
This is great TV.
Enchanter, Transmuter, Conjurer, they look great. Conjurer does more conjuring
What
rather than
subclasses?
teleporting.
Like, what are they subclasses for?
Arcane.
No. I mean, like, the Enchanter is, I assume, Wizard.
They're all wizard.
All three of those ones are. Okay.
Four, yeah.
I can count.
The one thing I liked about the Necromancer is it can now cast Find Familiar and conjure either a skeleton or a zombie. I thought that was neat.
I like the idea of each of these subclasses presented. And so I really should have done my homework and read it. I'm going to give my little compliment to the team for that, because often when these Unearthed Arcanas come out, and it's one of the contributing reasons to why I so often don't do the homework on these segments, is that I usually don't care about most of them. I usually am like, none of this is, the premise isn't sold to me, and so why would I care about the mechanics, is kind of the way I often feel. But all of these ideas are good. Like, I like the idea of an Arcane Archer, and I like the idea of a tattooed monk. It always seems to be a little bit too, it's a lot of spaghetti at the wall. But that's what playtesting is for. And I got to say, this packet at least was a bunch of stuff that I was interested in.
Well, let me ask you
now that I hear about it.
to salvage this segment. Are we, and I don't just mean the four of us here, because the answer is yes, but are we as a community, and I'm asking the chat this, kind of exhausted at this point by Unearthed Arcanas kind of in general, right? Because we've gone through the 1 D&D into 5e 2024 kind of long Unearthed Arcana, timeline. We've had the MCDM role-playing game doing playtest after playtest. We've had Daggerheart playtests at this point. And as a marketing tool, the playtest has really... We did Grim Hollow playtests for a year last year before we got to the Kickstarter, and we've done playtests since Kickstarter. Is the playtest starting to become a bit exhausting as a marketing tool and as a way of kind of getting your game out to people? Or is it just that the community is fracturing a little bit more? People are going into the games they want to play, and there's just too much content across different games. Sorry, I know that was a long way of asking that question, James.
Ben, I think you've struck on something solid here, which is that, everyone is playtesting now, and playtesting very publicly. And it's not just RPGs that has captured that too. I mean, a lot of major video games have extended early access, like Hades 2, which is coming out this week and I'm very excited about.
Yay!
Has been in early access for years now, and I have intentionally avoided it because I don't want to deal with unfinished games. I work on unfinished games enough to not want to play them too. And that's kind of how I feel about D&D. I think there are certain subsets of D&D who, for very, very valid reasons, love playtest stuff because they cannot get enough of the crunchy character goodness, right? It's like, it's free. It's a free lunch. You get it. You don't have to pay for the book, and you get to, you get to justifiably yell at the company that is ruining your favorite game. I think that's a huge value proposition. It's really good for the hyper dedicated fans of the game part of the role-playing game. And that's true for Daggerheart, it's true for D&D, it's true for MCDM, it's true for Hades, it's true for World of Warcraft, it's true for all of these things that have some kind of public testing that is also a marketing arm. And I just increasingly find I am not in the audience that is appealed to in this kind of marketing.
Yeah.
The playtest feedback we got back for Grim Hollow Transformed was amazing. Yeah, we had some really great game design minds working on this stuff and giving us feedback, and it was wonderful. It's good for the company, not just for marketing, but good for actual feedback. Now, Wizards of the Coast, I would like to think, and I would bet that they look at all the feedback, but they probably get so much feedback that they're not fine-tuning based on very specific people's requests, but they are getting an overall theme of, is this liked? Is this going to be something that, if it goes up on the D&D Beyond, people are actually going to use? And I think that goes beyond marketing to user experience sort of feedback. It's not necessarily game design, but that is good for understanding the audience and what the audience is looking for.
Yeah, I guess I just kind of, because you're right, not to be entirely cynical about it, the playtesting isn't just marketing, and I know from having spoken with people from Wizards, when he was there years ago now, but Dan Dillon was in charge of some of the playtest feedback on 5e 2024, was saying, they do read it all. It just feels like early 2014, and I think I've said this on the Lorecast before, but it just felt like Unearthed Arcana had a slightly different purpose, where they were just kind of throwing things out there and being like, hey, wouldn't this be cool? The revised Ranger is the one that I always go back to as like this cool thing that it felt like a little gift to the community. And now it just kind of feels like weird saturation, especially because they're repeating playtests, which from a playtest perspective is probably necessary, but from a keeping your audience engaged, it gets exhausting after a while, after you're getting the same subclasses kind of coming back again and again.
I may be speaking out of turn here because I have never worked full-time in a games QA department. Sure. But game studios used to have QA departments for this, right? I think that's why it strikes me as marketing, is because you can do big, large-scale playtesting, especially as a large studio, right? For studios like MCDM, for studios like Darrington Press, who do not have the vast resources of Hasbro backing them, it does make sense to do this crowdsourced style playtesting for very practical reasons. For Wizards, when D&D Next did it in 2013, it did feel very reasonable because D&D's head was on the chopping block, right? This was like, okay, we are going to appeal to as many D&D fans as possible because we have a very real, logical fear that this will be the end of D&D. So we appeal to you, the fans. But right now, it's a huge game studio, but it's not even a D&D thing. I mentioned World of Warcraft earlier, right? Blizzard has all the money of Activision behind it, and they still have their PTR, and that's a big part of the hype cycle for their game, for all their games, Diablo, Overwatch, all those things. The value in mass playtest feedback cannot possibly be understated. It's so important, but there are other ways of getting it than public feedback surveys, which I think is kind of the fine-tuning, right? You can't fine-tune really well based on that. Sometimes a QA department is a lot better.
Yeah, I wouldn't overestimate how much Wizards of the Coast, I know they've got Hasbro behind them, but how much they could justify having a dedicated, proper QA department. I don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised if that's not a thing. I assume they're playtesting and doing all that sort of thing within the design studio, within the people who are kind of designing, playtesting, iterating, working on it again. And even as video games, from a technological standpoint, will show you, you'll never find everything. As we've learned, I'm learning, I'm sure Shawn already knew with Grimhollow, there are things that no one ever would have found once you throw it out to the public and they start finding all the little things in there that kind of change things.
There's something that James said that I think is worth repeating, which is that James said that they are not the target audience for something like an Unearthed Arcana, and I feel the same way about me. It's just weird when it's we're a podcast with a panel of 4 people, and are we the people that look at this thing? And if 50% of us aren't, then I feel like it gets maybe more of a megaphone than it would in a broader community. But because I'm such a homebrew heavy DM, when it comes to something like, well, now what if there was a monk with magic tattoos? I am more likely to want to design that myself than to wait for them to do it and to tinker with their version. I would just build it from scratch.
Speaking of building things from scratch, this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast
lighting change
is brought to you by Borg, which is a rules-light, art-heavy TTRPG at the end of the world. This sort of Mad Max-themed Borg compatible RPG is currently at Kickstarter. We're going to take a closer look at it. I'm quickly going to copy the link whilst we're doing that. But it's worth mentioning, this project, Borg, is being done by Matt Domino, who is the art director on Grimhollow. If you love their work, and I very much do, the art style for this project is absolutely incredible.
It's badass. It's so cool. Like Borg always has cool art. This is the coolest.
I agree. If you love Mad Max, post-apocalypse, this kind of has it all. Like I said, it's compatible with Borg, Wasteland Degenerates, and CY Borg. 130 plus pages of art and rules, 40 plus mutated beasts, bugs, and thugs to use as enemies. There's vehicle mods for fast-paced vehicle combat, so you can kind of scrap your own vehicle together, use it in combat that is fast and aggressive. But there's also 6 unique classes in here, all of them scratching a specific itch. Did any of these classes, I'll mention them all, but did any of them jump out at anybody in particular as the one they would want to play?
First of all, I want to say that it strikes me that all these classes, like just from their name, they are dripping with character, right? I would want to play any of them just because they all feel good. Wretched headhunter, doomed acolyte, mutated biopunk. I'm like, yeah, man. If there's one thing that Borg never fails to satisfy, it's this heavy metal vibe. Wretched headhunter just has such a good mouthfeel. Like, I can't help but want to play that.
It makes me think of the first time I played Borderlands, the original one way back in the day, was as the sniper. I do love a good kind of post-apocalypse sniper dude, sitting back, taking headshots, that sort of thing. Shawn, what about yourself? Do you have one that jumps out at you?
You have to be the doomed acolyte, right? You have to take the radiation that's ending all life and say, yeah, I'm going to use that. Because that seems like a great idea. Let's get that clock ticking faster as we head toward a total apocalypse.
Well, also worth mentioning, there are also radiation rules in this for everybody needing to manage their exposure to the radiation or potentially perish. Dael, we're putting our Talkboard campaign together. What are you playing as?
Well, I was going to be a wretched headhunter or a doomed acolyte, but since both of those have been taken, I guess I'll play the unbridled Esper.
Okay, great.
And that leaves only Ben Byrne.
The Unbridled Esper, which is like a psychic style character, and this comes with 12 psychic abilities that also have the potential to backlash, which Borg does that kind of magic is dangerous thing. Talkborg doing the same thing with some psychic backlash, which
I can't get a psychic nosebleed, then what's the point?
Exactly. Is it even psychic powers at that point? We've got the Savage Beastmaster. They can command some of the creatures, the beasts and bugs of the wasteland. We've got the Mutated Biopunk, which metamorphizes and evolves. We've got the Bloodied Butcher, which is the close combat kind of hack and chop style character. And if you want to play all of these, there's even a starter adventure, Echo of Steel, as part of this Kickstarter as well.
It's so colorful. It's so pretty, but also so apocalyptic.
You know, it says 130 pages, but it has everything you need to play that, right? It's got all the classes. It's got all the rules, and then it's got that starter adventure. It's everything that you need to test it out, see if you like it, and then if you like it more, dig deeper. I love that in a project.
Feels like I'm dousing my eyes in sour nerds looking at it. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, if you want to douse your eyes in sour nerds and support Talkborg, you can hit the link that is going to be up there if you're watching this on YouTube or in the description. Go check it out. And speaking of things to check out, EN World recently did a study. I just thought this was interesting before we get to some listener emails. This was published on EN World by Echo Hawk about how much D&D stuff is there. And this article was reviewing how much content came out for each edition in terms of number of publications and also page count of those publications. It tended to count less kind of unofficial published things, like Unearthed Arcanas would not be counted for 5th edition, for example. And then looked at how, if you were a collector trying to collect every piece of published content for one of the editions, how much would it cost? And there were a couple of sort of, I don't know, interesting tidbits that came out of there. For example, I didn't realize, like I always knew that 3rd edition in particular had this reputation of like extreme content bloat, of like, you know, hacking together a character with 1 feat from this obscure book and a spell from this book over here, and they're using the subclass from over there while a class from this published book. If you wanted to collect everything from 3rd edition, you would have needed to have paid $536 per year that 3rd edition was out. And that's not adjusted for inflation.
Imagine having those all in physical books as well. Because it's like, someone, I've had new players accidentally cobble together a character like that on D&D Beyond, where they keep getting, a feat from over here that they didn't realize was some specialist setting or whatever. But boy, doing that with physical books, whoo! Woo! Something else.
You would go to Gen Con and you would see the DMs that were running like organized play where all the books might be legal, dragging around basically the luggage from Terry Pratchett's books, right? It was just these huge roller carts and all books because they needed or wanted to be able to access anything that the players could throw at them. And it was quite a sight to see.
I wish I'd seen that site, Shawn, because when I started playing 3rd edition, it was in 2009. So post 4th edition release, right? Playing 3.5 when it was a defunct edition. One of the players in my game, a truly avowed power gamer, right? We were all in high school, and this was like a giant in the playground character optimization boards addict, a fiend for, power game characters. And at least by 2009, the pirated RPG trade was in full swing, right? And so I never had the chance to see the epic luggage of books. I just saw the epic list of PDFs that he had pirated from the internet somewhere.
I mean, could you tell the power gamers back in those days, Shawn, by the players that were sitting at the table, by the number of books they had stacked next to them because they had cobbled their character together?
Yeah, but everyone, it was like that for everyone.
Right.
I can't remember exactly, but they would go back and forth with, if you want to use a rule from one of these books, that's fine. You just need to have a physical copy of the book. Right. And so, yes, people would come with a large pile of books. And if you're playing different campaigns, maybe you have this stack for this character and then this stack for that character. It was an interesting time. But this information, what blew my mind, and I knew it was kind of true, but didn't realize the extent to which it was true. How much content 2nd edition AD&D had compared to any other edition. I knew there was a lot that TSR was just pumping out as fast as they could, but this is madness level content. For
context around that, I said that to collect 3rd edition, you needed to have spent $536 per year. For 2nd edition, it was $751 per year for every year that edition was the active edition of D&D to be able to keep up with collecting everything. So it's just mountains of things that they were putting out.
There was a chart that went along with this. 550 products for AD&D 2nd edition, where you only had about 170 products for 3rd edition. So like 4 times the amount for 2nd edition.
It might surprise modern audiences to know 5e, among the most cost-effective editions since 1st edition to collect, requiring only $300 per year for you to have purchased everything. And that's an average out because 5th edition exactly. 5th edition kind of ramped up, obviously, in its early years. I think this article said they were only doing 4 to 7 books a year in the early 2014. I'm trying to go off the top of my head here. But then it has ramped up in the more recent years where I'm honestly a little bit, this is slightly changing the topic, but I'm a little bit lost I keep thinking, is Eberron out yet? Is it not? Is the Forgotten Realms out yet? Because they've been announcing things so far in advance, and then it releases like half a year to a year later. I'm getting lost in terms of when what is actually
and the actual
publicly
releases
available.
Get sort of lost in amidst the like announcements of things that are still to come. So you don't know. Yeah.
Well,
that's the worst part.
That the Eberron book was supposed to have come out, but because of the problems with the cover, it's been delayed.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I keep waiting for that book to come out.
Everyone.
That's a soundbite just for you at home.
Here's one thing I want to say about 5e that also applies to 3 and 4e in some ways, but I think 5e has kind of upped the game a little bit, and that's about peripherals. Because 5e, its strategy was book light, but I would say peripheral heavy. And that's in terms of like miniatures and stuff like that. I think 4th edition was heavier, but I think as a ratio of cost of buying books to cost of buying minis, especially the blind box pre-painted WizKids minis that you buy like a trading card game booster pack. Maybe this is just me, but when 5e came out, And there was nothing to spend my D&D money on. I was buying a ton of minis, man. I was getting the 5e minis like mad because I just got to college. I needed to rebuild my collection of D&D minis. I was like, I needed those things. I really wanted them.
The peripherals that really got me were the spell cards.
Oh yeah,
because you think, I'll just buy the spell cards for my class, but then you're running a game and now you're like, I'll get the whole arcane set. I'll get the whole arcane set, and then you realize that 2 different characters got the same spell, and so now you need multiple copies. Yeah.
Speaking of products that got made completely redundant by D&D Beyond. Yeah, that's interesting because this study wasn't taking into account like peripherals like that. So you could be right, James, on that. I suppose my question is, in terms of peripherals for earlier editions, for folks that have been playing longer than I have, how important were things, entire little sub-industries have jumped up around like dice collecting or miniatures, especially with 3D printing or whatever it is. How important were those as products in earlier editions of the game?
I would say not as prolific as it is now, but it wasn't non-existent. The minis may have been lead, and the paints may have been toxic, but they were there. It's just you couldn't license out anything. There was no license for you to make anything. So even if you did, you risked the ire of TSR's lawsuits by even mentioning dragons in your product or whatever.
Buy my mini of a floating eyeball beast.
Yes. The many-eyed floating eyeball beast.
Just calling out Reaper Bones.
The
other interesting little tidbit that came out, more so in the comment section of this article, but I think did come from Echo Hawk as well, talking about how there was a 5e compatible product drop, as in third-party 5e content, after 2023. 2023 kind of hit a peak of third-party publishers publishing things for 5th edition, and then there was a sharp decline afterwards down to like 2015 levels, if I'm remembering the chart correctly.
Wow.
That information came from, I believe, RPG Geek, and may not be 100% accurate, but it's an interesting kind of tidbit to note that was around the time. I think the OGL had happened a year and a half before. Maybe some Kickstarters that had been launched earlier than that were still fulfilling. And then that was also the point that Cobalt Press started doing Tales of the Valiant. MCDM started doing Draw Steel. I suppose Darrington Press weren't publishing many 5e products. Oh, a couple.
They were. I know at least one that I worked on.
Yeah, well, I was going to say 2, right? All right, I didn't mean to upset anyone. I just...
Get him, James!
The comments are going to come for me.
Now, part of that, though, I have a feeling is just they slow down at RPG Geek and their ability to put in information. Because I know that there have been plenty of products that I've worked on in the last couple of years that just never made it into RPG Geek, whereas there are, from early in my career, like 2002, 2003, 2004, things that I didn't even remember making that probably you couldn't find if you tried, and they were online only, that sort of thing. Everything was getting cataloged, and there may be a bit of a slowdown in the turnaround for the wonderful procurers of that site.
Well, speaking of procurers, we have procured emails. As Dael said before, James, what's the email address if you want to send an email to us and we will answer it?
Well, of course, it's podcast@ghostfiregaming.com.
Yes, it is. And we have received emails from the likes of Jacob, speaking of procurement, who is asking curiously, why don't companies like Ghostfire, MCDM, Darrington, Cobalt Press, etc., have more of a presence in the EU retail space? I put UK in the run sheet, but I think I meant EU. What avenues are available for EU retail, and what hurdles need to be overcome for physical books to get on EU shelves? And is there something smaller companies will try to increasingly address? One thing that I think the public don't notice a lot, and James kind of mentioned this a little bit before, is that a lot of third-party companies like MCDM, like Cobalt Press, like Ghostfire Gaming are actually not huge companies in terms of the number of employees and people they have. And so a lot of that getting physical books onto shelves, a lot of it just has to do with number of hours in a day and like resources. The ability to be able to build relationships with B2B partners, like distributors that put books in stores.
What's B2B?
Business to business.
Thank you,
Thank
Shawn.
you.
If I'm a publisher, I'm one business. If you're a distributor, you're the other business, and then the distributor gets it into the retail stores. Ghostfire, we're still building our presence in US retail stores. I believe UK retail stores, I know that's not the EU, but UK retail stores can currently get Ghostfire stock into their store. It's a matter of like folks going to their local stores and kind of asking about it, you know, and asking, hey, is this going to become available? Because that will get the store to ask the distributor, which will get the distributor, if there's enough demand for it, to then go and ask the company and ask them, hey, enough people are asking for your product. We'd love to distribute it for you. Here we go.
We need to get Nick in here and just answer the question.
Yeah,
The
there we
logistics
go.
guy.
Well,
I'm going to be honest with you, Shawn. Nick kind of did just answer the question.
well, that's good. That's good. Thank you, Nick. Via that. With all of the drama that was surrounding Diamond distributors who went, bankrupt and then tried to take stock that was given to them on commission and say, this is ours and we're going to sell it and you're not going to get any money for it, publisher. Yeah, it's a tricky business, and it's not like there's millions of dollars floating around for individual books or even individual companies for the smaller companies. So it needs to make financial sense to do in the first place when there are much easier ways to get books to people digitally or even through mail order, etc.
Yeah, I definitely don't know. I probably know the least about this stuff, but I know, for example, that MCDM for Draw Steel have said, we have deals. Like if a store wants us to send them books, we can like work out good deals for them and great prices and stuff like that. But they have to email us directly because I think ultimately there's a factor of risk at every step, right? Like a small store, a game store, doesn't want to risk stocking books that aren't going to sell because they're by a small company that don't have as huge an audience, and if some random person walks in and is looking to get into TTRPGs, they're going to reach for the one they've heard of, probably. So there's risk on that level. And then there's risk on the level of the publishers getting books printed and sent out to a store that won't sell. There's just sort of problems at every step of the journey, which is what tends to get in the way, is my understanding.
A good YouTube channel, if folks are interested, is Lords of War Games and Hobbies, I believe. They're two Canadian chaps who own a game store in Canada. Their YouTube channel does focus a lot more on war games than it does tabletop RPGs, but they give really good insight into owning and running and operating a game shop and a hobby shop, and the sort of things that they have to deal with, again, mostly in the context of dealing with like Games Workshop and other Corvus Belli, the people who do Infinity. The fact that even GW doesn't want to produce stock that they can't move, because storing things is expensive in its own right. And having space on your shelf is expensive in its own way. And, to talk in an RPG context, if you could stock Wizards of the Coast books that there is more of a demand of because they're a more well-known company versus a third-party company where people feel like they're taking more of a risk on buying something from a third party, some RPG players, especially if they're buying from game stores and aren't online a lot, may not even realize third-party companies really exist and might think of it as homebrew more than like, play-tested, thought out, published rules. And so shelf space becomes like a factor for game stores in terms of what they're willing to stock. I
mean, it's really clear that you can track the rise of the third-party publisher with the ubiquity of the internet, the consumer internet, the e-commerce internet, and crowdfunding as a particular branch of that. Because, the best game stores in Seattle have really well-informed staff, right? They're staff who play a lot of games. They're fairly online enough to know about what's coming out because it comes out through online means. And game stores that don't do that will basically never be stocking third-party stuff on the shelves because it won't move. The only way to move it is for one of the store's like staff to see someone is looking it over and basically give them a sales pitch. Unless you are already a pre-existing Grim Hollow fan, but then you've probably backed the Kickstarter already. So like, you're not buying it in a game store.
I mean, just to be clear as well, from Ghostfire's perspective, we're coming to US retail. I think we've been in US retail for a little while, but trying to increase our presence there. We are available in the UK for distribution. We are working on making inroads into the EU, but it's just a time and kind of resources thing. It takes time to build those relationships.
Thank you, Nick in a Ben suit.
Just let me pull down the zipper on the back. I'm nicking them out. Anyway, maybe
what an impression.
That was actually pretty good.
Speaking of homebrew, Max also emailed podcast@ghostfiregaming.com with the most economical email we've received. No body text. I don't know if that was deliberate, Max. I apologize if you put a very well thought out essay into your email. All I received was the title, which was Thoughts on Homebrew?
So we're going to homebrew our own email in response to this question.
Yeah, I will homebrew first.
Thank God.
Okay. Well, I love this question when I get it because everything is homebrew. It's not like some machine out there made this content. It is coming from the minds of people who play the game, probably at home, and come up with these ideas and think, this is pretty cool. Let me, A, make it for my own game. Let me, B, make it for my players. Let me, C, make it for other people to use. D, let's put it out in a book and see if lots of people like it. So the difference between the thing that comes from Wizards of the Coast and the thing that comes from Kobold Press and the thing that comes from Darrington Press and the thing that comes from Ghostfire Gaming and the thing that comes from your home DM is just the amount of time and the process that it takes to get it from initial idea to finished product. And so it's that process that will differentiate homebrew from a published thing. That does not mean that the published thing is any better, is any more balanced. The process may make it so, but even the process may not hold from time to time, as we talked about earlier with playtesting and so on. So do not just scoff at homebrew. Put it through the same sort of rigorous or not rigorous, depending on your style, evaluation that you would do. Does it feel right? Is it fun? Is it flavorful? Is it effing balanced, right? You go through all of that and ask yourself whether it's a Wizards product, a homebrew, true homebrew, your DM product. Ask those questions. Don't just assume it's great on one hand or bad on the other hand in either direction.
Homebrew is this pejorative that we use to label stuff that doesn't have an official seal of quality on it. And if Wizards can't put that seal of quality on it, then everything becomes homebrew under that label. And I think the sign of whether or not the sign of whether or not you respect homebrew, whether you respect non-official game material comes down to whether or not you think of it as homebrew versus you think of it as something indie, right? And the kind of community that you're in can affect that too. I have often sort of bounced back and forth between communities that are very focused on indie games and very focused on sort of official games as well. And I think that sounds a lot like the distinction between records with a label and indie artists as well. And so if your indie game gets too much polish, right? If it gets into the space that sort of center space of we call the third party publisher space, where we do put a lot of playtesting in, we do put a lot of effort into making it as good as the official Wizard stuff, even though we're publishing under the OGL, the really indie crowd kind of takes issue with that sometimes. The grunge of homebrew plus an unpolished professionalism, I think, carries a lot of sway in certain circles.
I think that's an interesting point because, as a person who, I've built my house of sticks, my entire reputation in DnD is built on homebrew. But I think you're right. There is an element of you can still not have the polish of a bunch of playtesting and, official publishing or anything like that. But brand can still get that recognition, right? Like you can develop that sort of grungy but still recognizable stamp that can build its own following. But I mean, look, thoughts on homebrew? Yes, positive. I need homebrew is very important to my continued existence in this space, to my past, my present, and my future. So I'm pro homebrew to absolutely nobody's surprise. If you wanted to be even more economical in that, you could have said homebrew. Thoughts? Sorry, go ahead, James.
No, you said something really, really valuable there, is that, you love homebrew and it has created a personal style for you. And I think that's exactly what this sort of this indie scuttlebutt is all about, is that the distinction is soulful, soulless, personal, impersonal, right? I think the sweet spot, and this is what third parties are trying to go for. And it can sometimes rankle us that we get kind of lost in the crack in between, is that it is not highly polished, made for everyone corporate art, but it's also not made on a shoestring budget. And so where in the continuum does that leave us? I don't know. I don't think people have the community or the vocabulary to really talk about it sometimes.
And it's interesting because you talk about developing a personal style. This is the place where designers get their sea legs, learn their personal style. You develop that flavor that Shawn is talking about. Mm-hmm. You learn your Fs, and homebrew is deeply, deeply important to that process. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it leads someone. It's important to say out loud what is, the obvious subtext of this conversation is that it's not true that because something is polished or official that it is soulless. But that is sort of an impression that people can have.
Right. But exactly.
Homebrew is an important step on that journey towards, maybe working at Wizards of the Coast, working on your own game, working on, whatever. I think people start by homebrewing. I do think it is interesting though, because you develop that personal flavor and you have to also develop the skills to meter that and sometimes, squash it down in favor of meeting the tone of whatever game you're working for. People have said to me, oh, I wish that Wizards of the Coast would hire you. If I worked for Wizards of the Coast, none of my stuff would be vague and evocative. Because that's not what writing for Wizards of the Coast requires. You know what I mean? But I think that developing your own taste of homebrew is a key step in developing as a game designer.
I love the fact that there can even be corporate role-playing games. Right. This is so wild, dude. It's like, this is not your grandfather's dubstep, right? It's like, when did this hobby of just nerds and outcasts and people who were seen as weird and fringe then take that step to now there is a corporate RPG? It's both refreshing and horrifying at the same time.
Coming at this from the opposite angle, because it feels like James and Dael, the conversation you two were having was like, when does indie, i.e. homebrew, or when does homebrew rather stop feeling like it's homebrew and grassroots and made by people who love the game, and when does it become corporate and soulless and officially plugged in with an official product? And looking at it from the opposite perspective, when I started getting into the third-party space as a consumer, as a fan, when I was first playing D&D, I was using Pinterest to mainly grab artwork of things that I thought were kind of interesting and like, oh, this looks like it could be an NPC in my game, blah, blah, blah. But would start to get just from my search terms, magic items and monster stat blocks and things kind of filter through onto Pinterest. And a lot of it, I thought, kind of wasn't great. I don't think, it was too overpowered, or it was just kind of, a monster with no health but did incredible amounts of damage, or a monster that's fundamentally a goblin but it was CR 17 or something. And I was like, why have they made this thing so powerful? And
the Mega Goblin.
For me, discovering Kobold Press, I was still a little hesitant. I was like, oh, I don't know. This is not Wizards of the Coast. How do I know if this is actually going to be balanced for the game? And the thing that gave me trust was seeing Wolfgang's name, Wolfgang Bauer, and knowing that learning kind of within that moment that Wolfgang had designed on 5th edition specifically, made me go, oh, this is a person who has actually designed for the game they must understand the game really well. And therefore, I trust a product that has been championed and worked on by them because I know they're not just some dude sitting behind his Instagram account kind of smashing away at the keyboard inventing stat blocks, right?
Yeah.
For which there is nothing wrong. Like I was that dude also for many years. And so like building trust with I think for people who are reticent of homebrew, I think that trust is something that like deservedly should be earned for people to want to include stuff in their game without sort of going over the content with an eyeglass to make sure they think it's appropriately balanced or whatever.
So true. And you know what? There are some people out there who just like homebrew because they like just kind of throwing ideas together.
Sure,
and they don't care to learn to balance it. And there are players who just want to grab the overpowered thing off the wiki that they found and chuck it in the game. And who are we to say that that's not also valid?
Yeah, it's all valid.
It's
all valid. I guess the distinction I would make is that if you are somebody who's smashing away at your Instagram account or even like playtest material like an Unearthed Arcana or things that we've put up on the Ghostfire YouTube channel, like with a PDF supporting document, that is homebrew. That is like, yeah, we've kind of brewed this up. These are some ideas. We think they could be cool. Let's throw them up there. And whereas I think once it gets to like published product stage, it's kind of gone through that playtest process to some capacity. I do admit I bristle a little bit at the label of homebrew on completed bits of work because it is used, as James said, a little pejoratively sometimes,
right,
or dismissively.
I think one could equivocate. I think one could compare.
Equivocate?
One could compare RPG homebrew to like fanfic, right? And that's not a knock against the quality of fanfic. I've read some really good fanfic, and I've used in game some really good homebrew, but it has a sort of, you are an independent making something that is dependent upon an IP that you don't own. And that's a weird area, not just legally, but also, I don't know, artistically, creatively. And so, yeah, we want the distinction, even though we are still making OGL stuff that's on a parent, that has a parent game. There is a level of like community creation and communal design and a artistic process that extends beyond a sole individual. That, yeah, I think that's the process of doing game design in a studio. And I think for a lot of people, no one's gonna care, right? I think for a lot of people, one is the same as the other. And maybe it's only to people like us who are in the thick of it that actually poses some kind of quagmire.
Yeah, sure. That's fair.
I'm having like an existential crisis, feels like the wrong word. That feels too extreme, but I'm having
an existential disturbance.
A little like
an existential party.
Yeah. An introspective existential party over the idea of, I was like, yeah, why isn't it valid for, this random 16-year-old to be like, and this is the death sword, it does plus 16 damage and it sucks out the soul of the person and heals you for 20 hit points. Why isn't that valid? And now I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I suppose ultimately I too have my limit on how much I care about balancing my homebrew. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going into my homebrew and thinking, how am I going to play test this enough that it is publishable in a book? No, I write out the version that I'm willing to play at my table, and then I put it straight to a YouTube video, and I do nothing else with it, and I almost never will. There have been a couple of exceptions where I've, worked on something for, a DM's Guild product where I've put in that extra work, but mostly I'm like, it's done. The foraging table is done, and I will never change it again.
And this is a great point, because maybe one big difference between homebrew that's sort of thrown out there and, highly polished stuff is there any consideration made to whether or not it will play well in someone else's hands, right? Homebrew is something you made for you, ideally. I think some Reddit boards might disagree with me on that one, but you made it for you. And if someone else likes it, bully for them, but they don't have to.
I think this also harkens back a little bit to our discussion about balance I think we had in a previous week. And I'm always reminded of a community quote sometimes where Abed says, like, something to the effect of I create a world of infinite imagination, but then I bind it in reality with rules or something like that. And I think ultimately, like, caring about balance is, for me, in some capacity, about like feeling real within the context of the world. If you have like the death sword of ultimate death and everything it hits just dies because it would sound cool, that feels like it was homebrewed by, someone who's not putting consideration. I don't want to, like, a 14-year-old who's sitting behind their Instagram account. I don't want to upset either 14-year-olds or people who have Instagram.
You guys, why do you hate the young people?
Ben,
because we're not them anymore, Shawn. Because we were them, but we're not. The millennials are the youngest, 29 now, and it's giving me an existential crisis. We're almost out of the 20s entirely, Shawn.
I think there's something extremely
did I say that out
legit
loud?
about you equating homebrew to childishness or immaturity, because I think that is just like fanfic. I think that is an equation that some people make unwittingly in their minds.
It's the early phase of the journey of game design I was talking about. So we assume you must be a child.
Mm-hmm. And it comes in with a lot of, I think, unconsidered assumptions.
I'm nodding. For the people listening and not watching, that noise I made sounded like I was doubting. So I just realized I have to clarify I am nodding. I'm agreed. That was a noise of agreement.
There's an old saying, form follows function. The form of something will depend on the function that it's supposed to have. And so if the function of your creation is for your game, then the form of that material will conform to that function. If the audience for your content is every D&D player who has a D&D Beyond account, that form will now change based on the function that content is supposed to have, which has gone from my players are going to think this is cool to every player out there and every game master out there needs to think this is cool. You can call that corporate. You can call that conforming. You can call that any pejorative term that you want to call it, but it's also usable. And usability, when you're making something that other people have to use, is a very important consideration in your design.
There's an interesting element of public awareness that goes on in this discussion, right? Because if you're homebrewing at your own table, who cares? Do what you want, have fun. There's only one F in that case, and it's fun. But the minute that you start,
the start of our podcast,
then the minute you start putting it, Jacob Budd from XP to Level 3 has the series where he goes through and looks at the worst homebrew on D&D Beyond. And it's like the minute that you start putting it out there for consumption in any form, that's when it starts being held to a higher standard. It's so interesting that we've landed on, like, we're talking about the assumption that homebrew is trashy, but also the assumption that the minute that you graduate from unbalanced to like official content, that now you're a corporate sellout. Like, there are so many interesting little psychological assumptions at play that I don't know I expected to come up.
It does sort of strike me that a lot of people are just looking for an excuse to hate on things. And maybe we should just sort of chill out a little bit.
Yeah. To be
chill
clear,
about the homebrew and
be clear, Jacob Budd's series is very fun.
I mean, some people might write some, questionable thing. Everybody does. And that's all part of the creative journey.
We've all invented the death sword of death.
Because I think maybe the thing you're touching on here, Dael, and I've been thinking about this a little bit recently, especially because like RPG, like role-playing games in particular, can be so ephemeral, especially compared to like a war game where the system is much more closed and it's like you can't just decide to like do a thing that the game doesn't have rules for. Like reflecting on my path into the industry and a lot of people's paths into the industry, like I didn't go do a degree. I didn't I just started homebrewing, which then became published adventures, which then I was able to use as a portfolio when I got hired by Ghostfire. I got hired by Ghostfire as the media dude before I started expressing, no, I want to do more writing. I want to do more designing. I did that through the YouTube channel before I was able to start working more and more with Shawn and James and work on actually published content. And going through that journey exactly as you described, from the 14-year-old who sat at home going, the death sword of deathness, this will be so cool, you know, whether it's for an RPG or just like a story that I'm writing. And that process all the way through had me thinking, at what point, like forget about the product for a second, at what point does a person go from a homebrewer to a game designer? Is that an important distinction at all in the first place? But it's kind of led to like that slight imposter syndrome of like, do I know enough about game design? Am I a game designer now?
We're all
am I
having
not?
the existential buddy.
It's like everything. It's like everything where you like take a class on, right? It's like, I want to be a writer, so I'm going to take a class on writing. And what's the first thing the writing instructor should tell you? By the time you're done with this class, you're going to hate reading. I want to be a game designer. All right, I'm going to teach you about game design, but guess what? By the time you finish this class, you are going to despise games, right? Because you're moving, you're changing your focus. You're changing your focus on, I love playing or running these games, to now I need to think about what makes these things work. I am becoming a mechanic rather than a driver. I am now going to take this machine apart and learn how its pieces work and put it back together again. And there is joy in that, but there's also that end of innocence, right? There's the end of innocence of I can no longer just enjoy this thing for what it is, because my focus is now moving in a different direction.
That's so real.
And the secret is, and they don't tell you this, but the secret is to never stop being the child who makes the deathly sword of deathliness. Always be that child. But you also have to put away childish things momentarily as you look at this from a different direction.
I have a C.S. Lewis quote for this. When I became a man, I put away childish things, including the fear of childishness.
Exactly.
Ooh.
And with that fragment of wisdom, it's time to put away this episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, because we are done for this week. But don't go yet. You still need to like and subscribe and thumbs and stars and hypes. Have you heard about the hypes, Dael? The hypes are the new thing. I have heard about the hypes,
but they've changed how hypes work a couple of times, so I'm a little confused about the hypes. But the hypes!
Hype this episode. If you're on YouTube, get the hypes.
Yeah,
this is
we want the hypes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Get those cool, fresh Gen Z hypes.
I don't know what hypes are, and at this point, I'm too afraid to ask. So give them.
I don't think you're gonna need to know for long. I don't foresee them sticking around forever.
It does just feel like a meta-gamed version of likes. Really, it's just a new like that YouTube have introduced.
I don't think this internet thing's gonna catch on.
If you've been watching on Twitch, thank you for joining us. I saw a couple of subscriptions and gift subscriptions during the episode. Thank you so much to those people. We really do appreciate it. It gets us out to more listeners. And we will be back next week, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 4 p.m. Pacific for another episode of the Lorecast. That time will change in future, but not yet. It's still 7 p.m., 4 p.m. and 9 a.m. on a Tuesday if you're in Australia. It's Monday if you're in the US. I don't know if I said that. Anyway, I've butchered this enough. My name's Ben Byrne, here with Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, James Hake. And we will be back next week with another episode of the Eldritch Lorecast.
Oh yeah, give us some death metal buzz.
Oh yeah.
Death sword. Gotta kill the bad guys.
Make it stop.
Save us from ourselves, Dante.
Lutheran rail. Nice, strong ending.